Thank you to Nicholas and all the team at Capital Link for arranging such a fantastic event and embracing technology to keep us all connected. 2020 has obviously brought us many challenges, and of course all of our thoughts are currently with the shipboard crew who are unable to return home to their loved ones and be relieved after many months on board due to border controls. However, COVID has, as Dimitri Fafalios already mentioned earlier in the conference, brought the industry closer together and in many cases increased collaboration as the pace of change in our industry has evolved. In this session, we'll be touching on one such pace of change around remote surveys, which clearly has been driven as surveyors, inspectors, specialist service engineers have not been able to get on board vessels. And what this has driven is ship managers, flag and class collaborating and increasing the use of remote surveys in order to keep our ships and our people safe. And that's been driven by the determination that the critical supply chains that our industry provides, whether that be for food, fuel, medical supplies or household supplies, continue to reach the communities that need them the most, so that our world is in a stronger position to fight the virus. Now, remote surveys are not something new. They've been available in the industry for years. However, as a result of COVID at Lloyds Register, we've seen up to 25% of our survey activity move to being remote. And of course, this has brought some real benefits, but also some challenges. In the next 40 minutes, we'll look at whether the willingness to accept remote inspection and survey methods through the necessity of COVID will become a new normal. And I'm delighted to be joined on this session by leading shipping companies, leading flags, and Martin, who will also ensure that we consider in our debate the opportunities for commercial, vetting and SIRE type inspections. So with that, I'd just like to maybe hand over to the panelists so they can introduce themselves before we go into the questions.
Okay, thanks Nick, and good afternoon to everybody. It's a real privilege and honour to be able to join you on this panel. My name's Katy Ware. I'm the Director of Maritime Safety and Standards with the UK MCA and also the UK's Permanent Representative to the IMO.
Thank you, Nicholas. This is Michalis Pantazopoulos. I manage the Liberian Registry out of Piraeus in Greece, where we support about 1,350 vessels managed by Greek companies, and we do offer remote safety inspection and other remote surveys, as we will explain later.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to this discussion. My name is Stamatis Bourboulis. I'm a General Manager of Euronav Ship Management Hellas. Euronav is one of the biggest crude oil carriers, operating more than 70 crude oil carriers of ranging from ULCC, VLCC and Suezmax. Is listed in the US Stock Exchange. We operate the ships under 4 different flags, 2 different classification societies, and we employ a very big number of different nationalities on board the ships. And I would like to second your concerns about the seafarers that are still somehow trapped on board our ships, many of our ships. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, wherever you are. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Nick, for the invitation. So I'm Martin Crawford-Brent. I'm CEO of RightShip, where I've been for the last 2 years. We're now approaching 50,000 vets a year on tankers and bulk carriers and around 3,000 inspections. And I'm looking forward to our discussion this afternoon.
And hello, and thank you for inviting me, Nick. And first of all, I would also say that our biggest concern right now, that's the seafarers, so we can get them safe home to their families and get some order in the shipping and the worldwide community in that sense. My name is Ralf Juhl. I'm the technical director of Hafnia, which merged with BW Tankers last year. We are owning up to 90 product tankers, various sizes, and we are commercially operating around 180. So for the ownership of 90 tankers, we are exposed to between 800 and 1,000 inspections every year from class flag customers. So we take this remote audit inspection subject very, very seriously, and I look forward to this discussion with a flag and other class and etc. in this forum.
Okay, thank you all. So I'd like to kick off the discussion, perhaps turning initially to Stamatis and Ralph as the ship managers on the panel. Just maybe you could start us by sharing what your experience had been with remote surveys prior to the COVID crisis, and how that has changed over the last few months during the crisis.
We started the experience of remote surveys, I would say, quite recently, last year. It is an option that is welcome and offered by the classification societies. Thanks to technology that is available nowadays, this is possible. I would say that the experience was enhanced and intensified during the period of COVID. To give an idea, in the first half of 2020, which is to date, so to say, even before reaching the half of the year, we have almost doubled the remote surveys comparing to 2019. And certainly, this is also related, mainly related, to the COVID-19 situation, which gave a kind of extra need to perform surveys that otherwise would have been carried out with a physical presence on board or at the office, I would say even, through this remote through the technology that offers the possibilities for a remote survey. So this is how it is, and I feel that in reality COVID-19 has boosted a dynamic that was already there from last year.
And I'm very much in agreement with you, Stamatis, that COVID-19 boosted it, because remote audit and inspection we are not unfamiliar with it. We have done it for a long time. We have done it for the damage surveys. If it was a minor dent or hull scraping or something, we have taken some pictures and fixed the issue with a class. We have done part of our annual survey automatically. So it is definitely not new, but it has always been followed by a sort of a skepticism where you often wouldn't require a follow-up audit with physical presence of a surveyor or an inspector or port state officer or something similar. But I think that the COVID-19 really made us think twice, because suddenly everything stalled, except from the expiry dates. They kept on coming, and they came fast with certificates and audits and surveys, and everything was just expiring. And of course, we could seek extensions, and we could extend, and we could continue just to push the wave ahead of us, but it was not a sustainable solution. So getting these verified, well-documented audits in place to the satisfaction of flag, ship owner and class and customers was very, very necessary in a very, very rapid mode. So I think that COVID have pushed what was just ahead of us, something we have to deal with. I think that just 5 years back, maybe we didn't took it seriously enough, because the development of the internet on board the ships is quite new, with with sustainable connections to the ships, which is required. You need a high internet connection to do a proper exchange of documentation and pictures and live pictures, etc. But I think we underestimated what we actually had, and COVID have pushed that forward. And I definitely believe that remote audit surveys, they have come to stay, and we have to work more seriously with it because it's a huge benefit.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Stamatis. Maybe I just quickly turn to Martin here, because picking up on Ralph's comments that remote surveys are here to stay. We're talking initially, I suppose, around class and flag surveys and inspections, but of course there's also a wide range of activity, much more around the commercial side and vetting. Martin, would you agree with Ralph's statement around they're here to stay?
Yes, I would agree with the fellow panelists in that remote servers are here to stay, and maybe even we can boost that with additional technologies. However, I would say the only caution is that we also consider what the limitations are, because I think the last thing we want is the credibility of this to be challenged by various stakeholders and other participants. You know, so I think that in the early days, sort of the extensions were just extensions on extensions, and I think there's a serious conversation to be had in terms of where does that limit lie in terms of the type and condition of the ship that's to be inspected remotely, and thereafter when do boots on deck follow. So I think it's very much a case of utilizing the technology to enhance the capability, to enhance the planning, the information, and the contact on board. But at a certain point, I think there needs to be a recognition that you still need to have boots on decks, and that is beyond, you know, the sort of the asset condition. It's also around issues of welfare for the crew, supporting the crew with maintenance technicians, things like that, which are also very, very important, you know, and a number of reasons why these things need to happen as well. Yeah.
Excellent points, Martin. And I'm going to turn to our flag representatives here, because you talk about, I think you used the word there also, equivalence, and making sure consistency is key within the industry, and we don't go and fall in any in pitfalls as we evolve the way that we assure the safety and standards on board. So Katy, maybe you could also just share with us your experience and how the MCA has been evolving over recent months.
Yeah. So, I mean, Ralph made a very valid point. We'd been mulling over initiating remote surveys with our ROs for a long time, and without a doubt, COVID has accelerated that. The first bit for us was when we've been faced with this, what industry is referring to the extensions beyond extensions. We can work in the 3-month statutory, but what happens when we get past that? And obviously IAX did a great piece of work there, which was led by LR, in terms of the underlying principles that we can do so that we can assess our vessels. So that as and when we come out of the other side. So the first bit is, how do we deal with the extensions beyond extensions? And without a doubt, remote surveys are part of that suite of measures that we've got to put in place, that we can risk assess our fleet and prioritize our resource. And Martin mentioned that as well. So there'll be some vessels that we can go, okay, you're good to go, we'll extend. There are the other vessels that we will need to simply put the boots on the deck. And then there's a whole batch in between that we'll be able to utilize the remote surveys as part of this extension beyond extension. Then moving forward, obviously, we're going to start trialing actually doing statutory surveys. And again, you know, there's going to be a big bow wave. We need resources, going to be precious. We need to work with our ROs. So it's a real stakeholder collaboration piece, and that the collaboration between the flag states and the ROs is going to be critical in this, because the flag states are going to have to act responsibly. You know, ultimately it's their responsibility to make sure these vessels are safe. So I see a huge amount of collaboration between the flags and the ROs.
Michalis, anything to add to that?
Yeah, what I will say is we as a flag administration, the last year or so, we start authorizing class societies on remote surveys, and then when COVID-19 attack the industry, as part of our annual safety inspection program, we establish our own internal procedure, and we move fast from digitalization, training of our inspectors, putting together a standalone scheme on how to inspect 4,500 vessels remotely, basically safety inspection, our SOLAS, MARPOL, this type of items, regulatory items. And the challenge was to establish a level playing field, practices that apply to all vessels, and to be in communication with the DPAs and also the officers on board. I'll say it's not in our case too much of extension of an extension, and we do not view a remote survey to fulfill the extension of a statutory survey. We use remote survey to fulfill the Liberian flag requirements that annually, at least once, the Liberian flag vessel has to be inspected on a bunch of items. And what we did, we released our own checklist to the DPA and the master, and we sought their assistance in an interactive mode to make sure that the vessel is in compliance. As simple as that. And so far, the program has been successful. We have more than 600-700 vessels inspected remotely, and we are expanding to preparatory surveys for imminent port state control inspection to be done remotely, to international ballast water management certification remotely, and also to audits, ISM, ISPS, and MLC. All of these programs are under development. So we are in strong belief that in addition to boots on deck, as Martin have said, remote is here to stay.
And maybe I can just go back to Ralph. And you mentioned earlier, Ralph, that you've been experience of remote surveys before. We're clear that consistency here is key. You're working with different class societies, different flags, and of course your vessels often will have different charterers, different port state control approaches. Would you welcome more consistency around the interpretation of remote surveys and what can or cannot be done, or are you comfortable with the level of collaboration that you see going on at the moment?
No, I would appreciate that a more formalized or standardized set of rules for remote audits and inspection was formed. That would make our job easier when we agreed with the various authorities that we have to agree it with. And I'm fully aware of the credibility in the inspection because fraud and falsery, etc., that will kill the whole idea of a healthy remote inspection system. And especially also in connection with what Martin said, if it turns out, especially in the beginning, that people are using this remote inspection regime to do a little fiddling, then we for sure will not get the oil majors for our part with the tankers. We'll definitely not get them on board and accept this more administrative inspection regime. I think what we should look at is to remove the bottlenecks, because a healthy remote inspection system would indeed save time in ports. It will save us for deviations. It will save us from having a lot of people on board the ship not knowing the ship. We could deal a lot more with the people that has followed the ship, maybe from new building, or if you are from Singapore, it's maybe the Singaporean inspectors you work with. You could get closer connected to the inspection party, whether it's the flag state or the class directly. So I think you will have a lot more transparency in a healthy remote inspection system. So I think we should go all the way. I think that next target is that you only see the ships every 5 years when they're in for special survey. That would be the ultimate. I'm very much aware that it won't happen overnight, but that should be the aim. And in that connection, we need this transparency going into the future with CO2 savings, emission rules, autonomous ships. You will need all this transparency also within ISPS, ISM, MLC. You will need all this transparency to be put on the plate if you want to go for autonomy. So yes, I think remote is a very, very important stepstone in getting further into the future.
Please, Stamatis.
I have to say that I was a bit intrigued by what Ralph mentioned as being the objective to see the ship every 5 years, if understood well. I feel that definitely the experience we have and which has been, as we discussed, so much more intensified during the COVID, has demonstrated the capabilities and the potential of the concept of a remote survey. There's no doubt about that. I fully agree. I fully agree that we have to secure the credibility of this method, otherwise we are going to destroy it. However, the remote survey, and I would like to emphasize the word survey as opposed to inspection, which in my opinion, it's a bit more specific observatory exercise comparing to survey, which is a more broader activity, multidimensional, I believe, with a person that has an experience and knowledge, meeting, of course, the ship on board, but also the people of the ship that are on board. There are, in my opinion, some limits there. Maybe part of the survey can be done remotely, of the currently surveys performed. Maybe the scope of the onboard visit may be different, but as I can judge, at least now, I think we will miss the objective of the survey regime if we say that we see the ships every 5 years.
Yeah, I think maybe if I just chip in from a official Lloyds Register perspective here and represent some of our IX fellow members, I think we were all keen to ensure that we don't lose momentum that COVID has allowed us to build up, particularly around the collaboration over the last few months. But I think, as you say, credibility and trust, particularly across the many stakeholders in our industry, who may not have had that first-hand experience of just what we can now achieve with the much better bandwidth connections and broadband capability when we connect to ships and we can see live video streams, is something that we all need to be conscious of and work on. I love Ralph's ambition, and it's a good ambition, I guess, for us to have in our sights of that 5-year vision. But I think it would be fair to say, if you know, and I think most of us here have had this first-hand experience, those first 5 minutes when you walk up the gangway and you're using your ears and your nose and touching things and talking to people and smelling things, sometimes you form an impression of the ship and how it's being managed probably before you reach the master's cabin. And that's probably one of the things that we all need to be conscious of, that as we evolve to new techniques, and maybe the first engagement is when the live video screen connects and we're already in the cabin, is something that I suppose the people within our industry and across the wider stakeholder community need to be comfortable with and prepared to evolve together with. And I suppose that's a good point maybe for me to bring in both Martin and Katy. Katy, maybe speaking from your personal experience at IMO, Martin across the wider, particularly commercial aspects and dealing with oil majors, dry bulk charterers. How realistic is Ralph's dream of 5 years?
Everybody's allowed a dream, and it's what keeps you going every day. I don't think we should write it off. I'm a little cautious. I think Stamatis has made a really valid point. There's a big difference between inspection and survey. Inspection is very interactive. It's about what's going on the vessels, you know, doing crew drills, etc. So it is from a survey point of view. I also agree with Ralph around the standardized approach. I think that's key because, you know, for example, when the ROs get audited by EMSA, they need to demonstrate that they are doing what they're following the rules and the procedures, and they've got the clear instructions and the guidelines. I will let Martin pick up on the sort of vetting side of it. But in terms of IMO, you know, IMO legislation is written with intent. And we have to be able to demonstrate, you know, that we are complying with that intent. So I do think from a port state control and a stakeholder assurance perspective, I think there will need to be a standardized approach, and we are going to have to take this to IMO. But I think it needs to be taken to IMO as a piece of work that's been done and said, here you go, because to debate this between 174 member states who are in very different places, it's quite difficult. So I think it will have to be led by the IROs and flag states that are using this to produce some form of guidance that will help standardize so that people know what's happening out there, so that if there's issues around port state control. So I believe it will need to be taken to IMO. There's a very sort of stoic view of how a survey is done, and there's various instruments. So but there's a real education piece that we're going to have to engage with on the international arena.
All right, so I believe it starts with understanding what we're doing in each inspection, survey, audit, assessment. So I think once we've skinned that and we've understood what are we trying to achieve on board, I think that makes it easier for us to standardize. Because I think there is a vast difference. You know, if you think of it from a safety culture perspective or from a marine assurance perspective, actually we're trying to assess things like morale, safety culture, cohesion. It's very difficult to do that remotely. And I would say, you know, the one thing that looking back on my career as a surveyor, I think some of the most meaningful jobs I did was actually able to help the crew, because they found themselves in a difficult situation that they couldn't resolve themselves, and they weren't getting the support from the owner that they needed. So, you know, there wasn't a good operator behind that ship and behind that crew. So I think that, you know, there also has to be an element of risk assessment in terms of understanding which ships are we going to allow this on, and under what criteria, and what are we trying to do. So there may be different criteria for, you know, renewal surveys versus, you know, annual surveys. But also I think, you know, bearing in mind that a good survey is probably 80% communication. Not to say that you can't do that, you know, remotely, but, you know, a really good survey is forming a rapport with people on board, understanding them, you know, bonding with them, and then really trying to help them. You know, it's not so much of a kind of a police activity. And I think that can be done remotely, but I think it is a lot harder. And I think we need to be able to separate and risk assess and then decide what is the appropriate tool for the job. Yeah,
and of course, as with today's session, we've got potentially hundreds of pairs of eyes watching 6 faces on the screen now. That of course also brings some real possibilities and benefits around avoiding duplication, maybe reducing workload on board, where flag, class, the ship management company, potentially charterers, P&I clubs, could in theory all be getting the same access to the same type of information at the same time, and reducing that burden of, let's say, duplicity and workload of people on board. So I think it's important maybe we also look at the benefits of the human element here. You mentioned already, Martin, the importance of human contact and being able to share experiences and pass on advice. But perhaps any of the panelists would maybe like to share some of their recent experiences of where, through this digital medium, we've been able to multiply that advice rather than dissipate the advice as a result of remote activities.
If I may say a couple of words on that, sorry, Ralph. our experience is positive because the way we do, even in the limited scope of an inspection, as Stamatis mentioned, we do not engage just the master. We engage the master, the chief engineer, but also the DPA, the company DPA. This is a link. You have to connect if you go remote. It's not just the master and the ship that you are surveying. In reality, you are surveying in a way the company too. And the company, at least in the sort of thing, is via the DPA in our case, you know, but it's of the technical department and everything. So in our case, we have seen a rather positive development where we engage more people from on board, but also company personnel at the same time. Ralph?
Yeah, I fully agree. And if you look at the that part of it, we extended our remote audit actually to be to make a remote audit of the office ISM documentation as well. So that has its annual verification audit done by Lloyds. And actually we could involve all persons, cross-departmental. They could just sit in front of their computer and they could listen to the auditor and the auditee, and they could assist, they could kick in. So the response we got afterwards was that this way of doing the audit had been extremely educational for the persons. They suddenly understand what happened in the other departments. They suddenly understood the whole concept of various procedures that are going, management of change procedures that are going from technical department to marine department to crew department. And they suddenly got a whole picture of a lot of things. So back to you, Nick, when you walk up and you do 90% of your inspection on the gangway, I would say when I sailed, the chief engineer, he put his hand on the engine and he could tell if the cylinder number 5 was in good shape or not. I'm glad that they are looking in the engine control room for that now. So things are developed.
I think we lost your sound, Ralph. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I just think that we'll develop and we'll be innovative in the way of securing the credibility, and then so I think it's not tomorrow, but I think it's maybe the day after tomorrow. It's not that far away, I think.
Yeah. I fully agree about the potential that this remote surveys and the technology in more general is given for connectivity, more, I would say, even permanent connectivity with a ship and the shore. I still feel, Ralph, that it is quite important to have an engineer that looks over to all the systems and the monitoring systems, but to have also the feeling of the situation in the engine room is also, I would say, quite worth still these days. And I'm sure you want somebody to fulfill both qualities, I would say.
Yeah. And I think we also recognizing, I think as some of the earlier panels discussed, the importance of us being able to continue to attract talent into the industry, and how maybe the thought of a minimum of 10 years at sea away from home before you can return to a shore-based job might not be such an attractive proposition given some of the other industries that we're competing with. Surely there's some opportunities here for remote also to enhance the attractiveness of the industry, to bring in talent into the industry, and to perhaps ensure that, as you know, we're offering an attractive long-term employment prospect and careers that we've all enjoyed.
I think definitely having that innovation and technology, you know, and using that as an attraction point. I mean, it brings in a whole lot of possibilities in terms of where people live and work. It brings in, you know, possibilities to make it, you know, easier for women to enter shipping and being a surveyor. I know from my experience that in class, it was actually quite challenging for all the ladies we had on staff, you know, to visit vessels. Thankfully, that has improved, but I think, you know, this is a great opportunity to accelerate that as well and bring a lot more women into surveying, for instance, or auditing.
Okay, so I'm going to ask maybe all five of the fellow panelists to use our maybe a minute of our remaining time left. We have 5 minutes left. And we'll go back to the original question that I think set the scene for the panel around whether or not the trend of remote survey that's been accelerated by COVID now leaves us with a new norm that we're comfortable with, or where you think we should be going with remote survey and inspection techniques as we collaborate going forward. Maybe we start with Katy.
Okay, so I feel quite passionate about this. They are here to stay. And I think the most important thing is that we do not lose the pace and the momentum that COVID has given us. It's exciting. We need to move it forward. I think it brings us great opportunities. I also agree with Martin. It will attract different people to the industry, particularly the world of surveying. I believe that for the short term, it is going to be a case of supplement, replace, or both. I think it's a mixture of all of them. But no, I think they are here to stay, and we've got to keep working at a pace in partnership with our operators, the ROs and the flags, to keep this moving and to build a stable, credible platform for the new technologies and the remote. Thank you.
Very briefly, here to stay. There are much more work needs to be done on the legal framework and the background, but definitely this will be one of the means to inspect and certify the vessels in the future, for sure.
So I think it is here to stay, but I think, you know, we still need to build a little bit more confidence. We need to understand what the limits are of remote inspections. We need to tailor our approach to those limits. So I think there's scope for us to consider what can we obtain on, you know, remotely or off the vessel. What do we need boots on the deck for? Be very clear about that. And I think the other thing is around scalability, making sure we can scale this and get the consistency such that we can continue to be credible, and that you know, that all stakeholders, including cargo interests and others from a commercial perspective, can also rely on this when it comes to some of the let's say more human factor, softer aspects of it.
I feel that COVID-19 gave us a very good opportunity to realize how the technology can give us the opportunity to be connected, although at a distance. And this is a very big gain, I would say, has given us a lot of experience on new dimensions of using this technology. Definitely this has to be used for remote surveys, and not only bringing the ship with the shore closer in any aspect. However, the limits are there. We have to find the limits both for credibility and for efficiency, and the physical presence on board is irreplaceable.
Yeah, and then it has all been said, so but I can add that there is of course issues to be dealt with, cybersecurity, credibility, etc. But there is so many low-hanging fruits out there, so we shouldn't set down the pace now. We should just move on and get this standardized, get verification set in order. We also have to wait for ships that are not up there with the IT systems yet. So we have time, but we shouldn't slow down the pace. We have to go for this remote audit. Let's take the low-hanging fruits, which will just be evident for the more severe and more heavy items that we have to deal with. And lastly, I think it is a safety issue. When a ship goes into a terminal, a tanker goes into a terminal today, you have a terminal inspection, you have a port state inspection, you have vetting inspection, and you have the ship manager who comes on board and main inspection. It is a safety risk because that ship only have 24 hours to deliver the cargo, then it's off again. Yeah. So I think it's also a safety issue. And yes, personal contact with the ship, but during port state, I think they would rather be without it. So I think it's also a safety issue. I think let's move on. It's here to stay. It's development, it's innovation, it's the future. So let's not be the one to stop it.
Absolutely. Well, I think our time is up, but thank you all of our panelists. It's great to see this so-called coalition of the willing across our industry to ensure we don't lose the momentum that we've built up and we continue to move ahead positively. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.